Legends of Tomorrow, I'm giving you one warning. I swear, you get rid of Victor Garber on your show, and I will cut you. I will cut you bad. So that better not be where this storyline is headed this season. So, in case you thought that they were done with the plot line of separating Jax and Stein, well, let me. It's not. They're still doing experiments, which for the second week devised by Ray, which for the second week in a row, which is is a backfire. Which is unsurprising given the Legends history. Why would you keep trying to do something like this? Everything you do, Legends, blows up in your face. Why volunteer for more trouble? So it blows up in their face that so we have two sci-fi cliches and going this week. The experiment blows up in their face and they do mind swapping, and then they're called to a meeting because headlines are showing that Hollywood producers are literally stabbing each other in the back in 1937 to get a new star who claims to be Helen of Troy. And she is currently working on the Warner Brothers lot in 1937 on a movie about Helen of Troy. And I looked online. I looked online, and I can't find any record of a Warner Brothers production from this time period that was about Helen of Troy in any way. So I'm guessing completely made up production for this. However, one thing I will give them credit for, they get the title screen right. They decide to do an old school Warner Brothers movie, and they get the exact font and set up the exact stock setup that you would expect from it isn't just putting it in black and white or doing an art deco font style or something like you normally see in this sort of thing. No, they actually get it exactly right. All the fonts and everything, even the formatting of the title sequence when they go to Legends of Tomorrow. And that just makes the old movie fan in me very happy. It looks like it could be the title card for a Warner Brothers production of that time period. One of the things that Legends does that makes me a little uncomfortable is they tend to ignore that racism or anything else existed in the past, except when they want to do a message show. And yeah, I know, I complained about last week's The Flash rubbing a message too much in our face, but you could just gently acknowledge it and just have them go about their business. For instance, the show from the 80s, Remington Steele. Sexism was part of the very setup of the series, and they acknowledged that it did exist. However, because the characters were more focused on getting their job done than on spreading a social message, it was there, but it didn't have to be the focal, and they never had to preach about it because the characters were more interested in doing their job, and that's just the way the world is. And so that gives it a sort of verisimilitude while that sort of gently puts it in there. I would like Legends start doing something like this instead of like last season having everybody just walk into a Nazi bar, a guy with a Jewish name and a black guy just walk into a Nazi bar at a black woman, have them walk in and have the Nazis have no problem with that. You're uh, yeah. It's not that bad, but it's still because Stein is in Jack's body. He goes out because the star that the Helen of Troy replaced. And here's the second sci-fi cliche. It's the woman who causes men to go crazy over her. That old cliche. Normally, I skip this episode in every series I watch because it's such a stupid cliche, and it's always plays out exactly the same, and it plays out largely the same here too. Only with the new twist that they never explain exactly. There isn't anything to explain why she's having that effect. No, we're just meant to believe that men are just that stupid. Yeah. There's no magical or sci-fi artifact involved with Helen of Troy. I kept waiting for them to pull that out. Normally that's in this cliche, so they do something different from the cliche. However, I don't think it helps the plot along any better. Thankfully, the episode doesn't get too preachy, but still, the basic premise is that all men are stupid idiots who, the first time they see a woman, will just be willing to resort to cold-blooded murder just to get take possession of her, and it does get a little preachy towards the end. So they have to remove so Hedy Lamarr has been replaced, and that causes a bunch of technology on the Wave Rider to disappear because, of course, Hedy Lamarr worked on worked on some electronic patents during World War II, and she actually figured out a frequency hopping technology that is basically the backbone of modern Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. It was originally a guidance system for part of a guidance system for bombs in World War II, uh, you know, but she did get a patent on it, and it did and it and it was the backbone of what became Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So the Legends have that going against them, and all the Hollywood producers who could normally, the moguls could normally be pretty cutthroat, but she seems to have brought out the worst in them. And what's more, when they try to rescue Helen, they find out she doesn't want to be rescued. She'd rather be here than in Troy watching the war, which, yeah, the war that never really happened yet. That if it did, it was a conflict between two empires that broke out at a major trading port city. I don't get it. Well, we can assume that in whatever universe Legends and the Flash take place in, the Trojan War, as it's described in the Iliad and the Odyssey, actually happened, I guess. So anyway, fair enough. She'd rather be a Hollywood star than having to watch from the city, than watching from a tower as thousands of people die. And yeah, that is actually something that brings some depth to this character that is often missing. Most of the time, the character is either evil or heartless in when they do this plot on upper sci-fi. Whereas in this, Helen of Troy is sympathetic. She's had 5 years of what? She's halfway through the Trojan War, and she's had 5 years of watching thousands of men die on the battlefield from a tower, and she just doesn't want to go back to that. So fair enough. Stein is in Jack's body, and that's where this really starts to stand out as Stein goes in, and of course in these episodes where they do body swaps, they live or die by the actors being able to impersonate each other. thankfully, both actors are able to do good impersonations of each other. Ray ends up having the time of his life since Cecil B. DeMille wants to make him his new leading man based on his looks. And well, at a major Hollywood party, the legends get into a fight because Helen is just driving all the men mad for reasons that are, again, just down to male stupidity. But the big reveal isn't the fight, or that Helen doesn't want to leave, it's that Damien Dark is there, and he's giving the legends a chance to leave. Which, of course, they don't take. Well, they can't take anyway, because by removing Hedy Lamarr from history, he makes the Wave Rider not work, which is why Stein is there. Hedy Lamarr was his boyhood crush, so he's determined to save her, even if he is in Jack's body. Which, again, that's where this thing about ignoring racism comes from. They have him walking around just doing his normal Stein thing, and nobody says a word, even though it's a black guy walking around Hollywood in 1937 like he owns the place. Yeah, that wasn't happening back then. There were black stars, there was even respected black talents, but blacks were mostly limited to running their own Poverty Row studios. They were not major talent, and they were not treated as equals. In fact, when they were traveling the country for their radio show, that the racism they'd encounter when trying to get hotel reservations was one of the major problems the Jack Benny show ended up having because of Rochester. Yeah. So anyway, but all that aside, Damien is his usual great villainous self. There's a big battle where she and Davia fight to the death with swords that they find on the Warner Brothers lot. However, those would be prop swords, so I don't get it. She is nearly killed. Stein gets to be in the body when they become Firestorm. He then has to, in Jack's body, convince Hedy Lamarr to go back to acting. She was demoted to being a phone operator, which I don't get. Even if they had another star, these movie studios had to put out 52 pictures a year. You're telling me that if she was replaced on one picture, she'd have no choice? But there's no way Warner Brothers would think that this Helen of Troy actress could be the leading lady in 52 pictures a year. So there'd still be roles for Hedy Lamarr, and she could have just gone to one of the other studios. So I don't get that part either. But overall, they're having fun. Damien Dark is always fun as the villain, so that's great. He and White Canary, whenever they get together, that always makes for a great protagonist-antagonist relationship. And anyway, Hedy Lamarr is returned to her proper place in history, so the Wave Rider is gone, and records show that all record of Helen of Troy disappears halfway through the Trojan War, so she doesn't have to go back to the war. She's dropped off at Themyscira, Wonder Woman's island, which would have a lot more impact, DC, if you would just let your TV shows and movies take place in the same universe. You could have had Wally or some other speedster be the Flash in your movies if you didn't want the TV show versions, and then this would have a real impact. It has an impact when they do something like that in Marvel shows or when they have Nick Fury show up in like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a cameo, because they take place in the same universe. So it's the same things you know and love. Here it's just it's just a random throwaway, and unless you've seen the Wonder Woman movie, you wouldn't know what this island is that they drop her off on. Whereas it could have been revisiting uh, revisiting a set from a movie and instantly know, you know, unless you know the name, and the set would have given it away. But whatever. So the villain's threat is increased. Uh, there's a good time to be had if you could overlook the flaws and some of the preachiness towards the end of the episode. All in all, typical fun episode of Legends of Tomorrow. I give it 5.5 out of 10. Perfectly serviceable and fun.